Okay, okay, based. So you understand the such a distinction between materialism and physicalism, right?
Uh, I know that I don't know exactly what the distinction is. I usually just use them interchangeably. So I guess
Yeah.
if we want to be more precise, you can go ahead and explain the difference.
For out of chartability purposes, I would prefer for me to identify a position to be a physicalist position, not a materialist position. Materialism got outdated from like the 17th century, really, and it's just a position that scientists does not adopt anymore because of the discovery of physical forces like gravity, which technically speaking is not made out of quote unquote matter, right? So I believe that you're going to want to say something like your position is that of a physicalist position, whereas you believe that the psychological states are identical to the mental states, are the physical states, correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty fair.
Cool. So, with that being said, what do you define the physical phenomena to be?
Sorry, the physical phenomena, is that something in
Yeah.
specific, or
Yeah, what does it mean
we
for
all?
something to be physical? This is called the condition question, by the way. So I'm asking, like, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for something to be physical?
Oh, I see. So my understanding, and you also have to bear in mind that I got like a perennial C in my science classes in high school, but my understanding is that things are going to be composed of matter, things are going to be composed of energy, and there's going to be certain relationships between these things in the form of physics. So we're going to have certain forces like gravitational forces, just relationships of these kinds. I think that's all kind of encapsulated by what's physical. Maybe there's other things in that. If you think I'm leaving something out, you can let me know.
So I'm going to play around a little bit. So I'm going to pose forth like the weakest objections, the weakest fucking objections to
Okay.
physicalism. So one of them is just going to be
Wait,
whether
before
how
you get
can
into
science.
really quick, before you get into the
Go
objection territory, do you think that that was like an apt description of what's physical, or do you actually think that
pretty
I
good
left it
description. There's
out?
nothing wrong with it intrinsically,
Okay,
but
I just want to make
I
sure.
would say that you understand what we mean by the mind in philosophy debates or philosophical conversation.
My understanding is that when you say the mind, at least in this context, you're saying that there is
Mhm.
something kind of detached or independent from the body or the physical body that kind of houses certain traits of ours, like our personality, our morality, our truth beliefs, things of that nature.
Well, obviously that would be a bad definition because if that definition was to be the definition which is being talked about or presumed in these types of conversations, then it would leave no room for, like, for example, positions like solipsism or some forms of idealism, where they're going to say something like things like quote unquote physical stuff or really just fundamentally mental stuff. Like for example, Bernardo Kastrup's version of idealism. So I think a better definition, and I think this definition is something you definitely agree with, would be something like the mind is just going to be a vessel of or a vessel for or something like consciousness. It is consciousness in itself, and it also is composed of quality and what is called intentionality, which is the ability to be about something in the world.
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure I understand why you think it's a bad definition. So, like you mentioned solipsism. Like, are you getting at the idea that because
Yeah,
there are beliefs out there? So, like
your
solipsism
view
being
presupposes that your view presupposes that the mind is only intelligible under a mind-body dualistic metaphysics, which is obviously not true.
so, do you think it's presupposing the existence of a physical body, and that's why it's a bad definition?
Yes,
Do you think that that's a that's a bad presupposition to have that there is a physical body?
yes, because of the fact that if we're making this presupposition in a definitional context like this, then that would be indicative of the idea that you believe that these two things have a necessary connection when they do not have a necessary connection.
Well, wait, really quickly. I mean, of course, like certain definitions that I have are going to be molded by like what I believe is true of reality, like to some extent, right? So, like, I believe it's true of reality that there is a physical body at the very least because I observe it every day. Because even if you want to say that all things are filtered through perception, that perception is telling me that I have a physical body.
That was not the
So, I'm
criticism I
gonna
was making towards your
wait.
definition, by the way.
Okay. So maybe could you clarify then if that's not the criticism that you're making, that it's a bad presupposition, then what exactly is the criticism?
So given your definition of what the mind is and given your concept of what the mind is, they seem to be compatible because we can both agree that it is technically speaking logically possible for there to be a mind in a world where there's no physical matter, okay? But at the same time, irrespective of that concept we have in mind or that conceptual fact, in your definition, it presupposes the opposite, which is that there would be a necessary connection, given that within your definition, you baked in the concept of mind-body dualism.
Well, I don't. So here's the thing, though. I don't feel very compelled to broaden my definitions to encapsulate every single possible world. So, is it in a possible world? Could we argue that you can have a mind without a body? Yeah, that's true. That's correct. I just don't think that's applicable to our world that we're living
I
in
think you're
currently.
missing the spirit of my criticism towards your definition. It's not to say that your definition ought to actually encapsulate all possible case scenarios. It is actually to say that your definition should be something which is accurately reflective of your concept, your idea of a specific term. And if it is not that reflective, or if it is not accurately reflective of such, then your definition fails to meet the goal.
Yeah, I think my definition does accurately reflect my belief on the matter. Like, I do believe that the physical body exists, at least in this world. I don't think that it's particularly relevant whether or not we can assume or imagine a mind without a body in some other possible world, because I don't think that possible world is like applicable to reality as we currently exist in. And like really quickly, I think that one of the purposes of a definition is to give explanatory power over reality. So if I think that something is not applicable to reality, then it offers no explanatory power, then I'm not going to incorporate it into my definition. Do you think that's a
I think
fair
you're
criticism
misusing
of
the
your
term
point? Or
explanatory
do you think
power. It's
that's
obviously not the way in which people use it in inductive logic.
would
But
you
with
mind
that being
would you mind
said,
clarifying?
the definitions beliefs connection is a bit like irrelevant because there's several things that we can have a definition of, we believe in the actual contents of the definition. So let's say I define the term unicorn and I, let's say, ascribe unicorn-like properties within the definition of what unicorn actually is. So I'm not a unicorn realist. I don't believe in unicorns, but I'm able to give a definition of this thing that I do not believe in. So no, it is not really the case that definitions are reflective of beliefs, but rather they're reflective of what we mean by a specific term when we actually employ it in conversational circumstances. So that's the obvious mistake you're making there on a linguistical level. Now, forget that part and let's focus on the fact that your definition, as I've said before, is quite literally just identical to you making the claim that there would be a necessary, or your idea for the mind is just something which is not the body, right? That's your view of what the mind is, correct?
So hold on a moment. I'm not sure that we've actually solved the problem with definitions. So your point about unicorns is somewhat correct, that we can't have definitions for having a conversation, right? We can't have definitions that service a conversation for the sake of having the conversation. That's
Yep.
true in some instances. I don't think this is one of those instances, because this definition of mind that we were going over, or rather,
Go for it.
actually,
Uh-huh.
my apologize. I'm a little preoccupied. Could you remind me really quickly? I'm sorry about
Your
this.
definition of what the mind is was something which possesses a nature which
No,
contrasts with that of a body, a physical body. That was your definition of what the mind is.
no, my fault. I'm not trying to remember that. I was just trying to remember because sometimes we get so stuck in the weeds that we low key
What are you
forget
trying to
how we got
recollect?
here. I'm trying to recollect what I guess what the purpose of the definition thing was in this conversation. I actually am
It
trying to
was for it
recollect
to
that.
lay out. So it's for me to understand your concept of what the mind is before we can get into
Oh,
the
I see.
ontological investigation of what the mind is, like whether it is material or whether it is immaterial per your own account of
Oh,
what
okay.
material is.
No, I think I got it
Yeah,
now. I think my fault. Yeah, my fault.
gotcha.
I'm currently adjusting something on the TV, so I kind
Yeah,
of
I'm
got
also
lost a little
outside,
bit.
so
Yeah, I'm gonna be done with that soon, so I'll be able to focus in. But look, if you wanna, I'm glad we clarified this. If you want to clarify that we can have a definition for the sake of the conversation that we don't believe actually describes reality, I would say that that's fine. If we want to make that distinction, then I think I'm
not only
okay
that,
allowing.
it does not describe reality, but it's also something which we do not believe in, right?
Or
So
do
it's
not
not
believe it.
there's no
I
there's
think
not a one-to-one relation between definitions and belief
I want
systems.
to. I want to say they're synonymous, but I don't think it's a big deal. It's like if you want to clarify that we can have this definition for the sake of conversation, I think that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that like my definition was limited because I don't believe that's true of reality, but I can incorporate that definition for the sake of this conversation. That's
So
fine.
maybe I'm just tied up in some contents you have said or something that I might have misinterpreted or something. So like just to be clear, just to re-give your definition of what the mind is.
Re-give my definition of what the mind is.
Yep.
Yeah, my definition of the mind was that it's going to be like this separate entity from the body that's going to account for certain characteristics such as truth beliefs, personality,
So hold on.
morality, etc. Now, very obviously,
If your definition of mind,
wait,
if your
really quickly.
definition of mind is, oh, you're not done? Let's continue.
No, I just wanted to clarify that as we just went over, that obviously presupposes that there's a physical body there. So if you want to reject that as being necessary for the definition for the sake of this conversation, we could still do that. That's fine. So go on.
Well, actually, it doesn't, now that I think about it, but it actually presupposes something else, which I won't need to get into currently. But I'm just going to simply attack your definition and whether it may or may not be incompatible with your view on the mind and nature of the mind. So you define the mind to be that which is not the body, which is able to causally account for certain characteristics as it pertains to consciousness, intentionality, and quality, respectively. So, if that is to be the case, do we not believe that brain states are part of the body?
Yeah, I would imagine that brain states are part of the body.
But they say that within your definition of a mind that it is something which is not a part of the body. So,
Yeah, so what my argument is that there's more evidence that brain states are what we're actually describing when we say the mind, as opposed to the mind being some separate object that accounts for these brain states. Or sorry, that
so under
accounts
your
for these.
definition of what the mind is, you'd say that you'd say that minds do not exist, right?
Yeah, minds do not exist. For clarity's sake, what I'm saying is that when you say the mind, what you're probably doing is referring to brain states. You're just
Okay.
misidentifying where those things come from.
Okay, so you're just an anti-realist about what we mean by a mind, the entity that we mean, and the entity that we're talking about when we're utilizing the word mind in conversations like this. But nonetheless, you believe that there's a source that explanatorily accounts for these characteristics, like, let's say, qualia. Correct.
Yeah, I'm inclined to believe so. Like, I think that these attributes exist. I just think that people are mistaken about what their source is. That to be
Okay,
clear.
cool. So, are you like an identity physicalist?
I don't know what that term means. Could you describe it? And I'll tell you if I think
Yeah,
that
so an
represents
identity
it.
physicalist, for example, is just going to make the assertion that for any mental state X, right, is going to be identical to a physical state P or G, for example.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Okay, and what's your theory of identity?
What's my theory of identity? Could you be a little bit
Yeah,
more specific when what are you asking from that?
I'm asking for a concept of identity. What are the necessary and sufficient conditions for one object X to be identical to another object Y?
Still don't exactly know what you're like. I would just imagine that they would have the same qualities, right? Like if like a
Same
thing
qualities, like
occupied.
the same characteristics?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're asking because like I don't really know that much about like the philosophy of identity. I just know that like there are certain things that are themselves. There are certain things that share the
But to
same
be clear,
properties
you're
as
making
other
like but to be clear, you're making like an identity claim, right? So presumably you should have like some concept of identity which is able to accurately flesh out what you mean when you're saying that
I'm sure I
mental
have
states
a.
are identical to physical
I'm
states, right?
I'm sure I have a concept of identity. I think what I'm trying to get at is that the way you're asking the question is confusing me a little bit. So
Okay, so
my
I'll
best
just
bet
flesh out
is
one theory of identity and I'll see if
yeah,
you
go
agree
for
with
it.
it. Okay, so what do you think about the Leibnizian view of identity, which is just to say that for an object X to be identical to an object Y, all things that are true of X would have to be true of Y.
I mean that sounds right.
Is that the
Like if
theory
you're
you
just
agree
asking,
with?
are you just asking me? I mean, just based on what you described, it sounds right. If you're just asking me, why do I identify brain states as being the same, pretty much as mental states as you would describe them? The reason is going to be that we can seemingly affect brain states in ways that produce outcomes in terms of mental states. So we can give somebody a lobotomy, we can give somebody a concussion, we can give somebody some other type of brain altering substance, and it will lead to certain outcomes that we would attribute to the mind or the mental states when it comes to their truth beliefs, when it comes to their morality, personality, etc. So if that's what you're asking, that would be one reason why I think that brain states are actually identical to mental states, as you would put it.
Well, I'm not asking for the justification. I'm asking for a concept of identity. So I'm pretty certain you agree with the Leibnizian view.
Yeah, the one you just described sounded correct. So that's where I'm going. And to clarify, just so we're on the same page, um, I would acknowledge that there's certain mental states that I don't know how to account for, but I don't think it's because they don't stem from the physical. I think it's rather that we just don't have all the physical facts about the brain. So I would say I'm making a prediction based on what we know that all the mental states we can't seemingly account for, we would be able to account for if we had all the physical facts.
Okay, I'll use like a Kripken argument. So It's just going to go like this. So
That's a what argument?
let's the Kripken argument, kind of. So
Are you using that or am
basically,
I using that? Sorry.
yeah, I'm going to be using an argument akin to that, really.
Oh, okay,
So
go for it, go for it.
yeah, so what I was going to say is simply that think of any pain sensations you felt in the actual world. Let's just call this pain sensation G, for example. So for
Mhm.
any pain sensation or psychological state G that you've experienced in the actual world, is it metaphysically possible for it to feel that same psychological phenomenon in some other world, but in that world there's no physical object?
Can you define metaphysical possibility?
Metaphysical possibility is just going to be something which is grounded in the essence of an object. So if something contradicts the essence of a given object, then that means it would be considered as a metaphysical impossibility. And if it does not contradict the essence of a given object, whether conceptually or empirically, then it would be a metaphysical possibility. It would be something which is compatible with the essence
Okay.
of an object.
So
Yeah,
with
so
that
it leaves
definition
room
in
for that
mind,
to
could
be
you
possible.
okay, so now that I know which definition you're operating under, could you please reiterate the question?
Yes. So for any psychological phenomenon, X, that you've experienced in this world, let's just talk
Hmm.
about pain sensation, like the pain sensation quality that you've
Yeah.
experienced in the actual world. Okay, is it metaphysically possible for it to experience the same pain in some other given world, independently of there being any physical state?
Yeah, I'm inclined to say no.
Okay, so what's the metaphysical contradiction? Like, do you have any logical contradiction and you feel the exact same pain in some other world, even if you have no brain states?
Yeah, so the argument's going to be that, I mean, we know that we feel pain and we know that we endure certain stimuli by virtue of certain physical stimuli, right? So if you're bitten in a certain area, it's going to activate certain nerves, etc. So we're capable of having that experience in this world. So I'm not saying that there's actually, hold on. Let me think about this for a moment.
You understand their view,
If you
even
want
though
to
I
say,
don't
okay,
hold this
okay, you
view.
know what? Let's go with that. Wait, really quick. Actually, let's go with this.
Okay.
Let's say now that it is metaphysically possible. Let's see where this goes. Sure, let's go with that.
Sure. So the reason as to why it would entail that the mind cannot be physical, your account of what identity is because of the fact that for any object X, which is identical to Y, right? If that object X exists in some other world, Y would also have to exist in that world. And if Y does not exist in that world, then that means there's something true of X which is not true of Y. And as a result, there's something which differentiates X from Y, respectively.
Okay, so could you, without using terms such as X and Y, without using those types of explanatory terms, could you explain what you mean? Maybe in more like natural language, like I'm talking right
Okay,
now.
this is pretty simple. Look at this. So, the natural language actually makes it a bit more complex. I'm actually trying to simplify this, and I think this example is going to land things the way you want it to, for clarity
Well, I'm
purposes.
sure. I'm just trying to understand because,
So,
like, yeah, go for it.
yeah, yeah. So, let's say we have like two worlds, right? Like, say, like possible world one and possible world
Yeah.
two, respectively, and we have an object called X. Now, you'd agree that if X exists in world one, that same X, if it exists in world two, then it exists in world two, right? You'd agree with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So you'd agree that the reason as to why X exists in world two, that to be something which is indicative of it's like if the same X in world one exists in world two, that means X cannot exist in one world and doesn't and not exist in the other world, due to the fact that X is self-identical.
Are you just saying that if all things are the same, that it would exist in the same way in both worlds, or like I'm still a little
Yeah,
confused?
if the same X exists in another world, then the same X exists in another world. So it is impossible for the
Yeah.
same X to exist in another world and not exist in that world because it is self-identical. It's identical to itself. So whatever which is
Yeah. So
true
like,
of X in
okay,
one world would be true of X in the other world.
I think I get what you're asking. Are you asking, can we have the same physical facts about the human body in both worlds yet have different experiences?
I'm actually saying something which is different. I'm saying that can you have the same psychological facts in both worlds independently of there being a physical fact in one world?
Um. And do these physical facts, do they only pertain to the human body, or do they pertain to everything about that universe? Like this
Any
universe
physical fact,
is
any fact that
exactly
you've
the
been
same.
reduced, any fact which is translatable to the language of physics, right?
Oh, okay. If we're gonna say that, then I don't know if it's metaphysically possible. Then, like, I don't know if there
Okay,
is
so
or
do
isn't a
you
concept.
understand how we investigate whether something is metaphysically and logically possible or not?
I would imagine you'd have to have all the relevant facts and see if there's a contradiction.
Not necessarily. We just run like a conceptual analysis.
Well, so
So,
here's
for
my,
example,
and
look at the
and
word
so I
bachelor.
talked about this. Wait, really quickly, I talked about this in my conversation with Shinra, because I think that Shinra brought up something about philosophical zombies, which I think is a little bit similar to what you're trying to do here, right?
Okay.
So he was asking, can we conceive a world in which we have all like these zombies that are physically the same as we are in the real, like in this world, yet they have different experiences, different qualia? The answer was, yeah, we can conceive that. But my objection was, I don't know how meaningful that conception is if we don't have all of the relevant details. When you ask me the question, is it metaphysically possible? Is there a
I'm not
contradiction
using
you
the
can?
conceivability notion of possibility, and
No,
it also
I'm not
depends on what
necessarily
he
saying
means
you
by.
are.
It
I'm
also
not,
depends on what he means by conceivability. Just to be clear,
I'm
it
not
could be like negative
necessarily, really
conceivability
quickly,
or
I'm not trying to
positive
say,
conceivability.
well, I'm not trying to say you're using the same argument. I'm just using it as an example because it feels somewhat similar. And what I was trying to say, and I think it applies to you as well, is when you ask me, is this something I can metaphysically conceive of, or is this something that's metaphysically possible? Can I think of a contradiction for it? I don't know how meaningful it is if I can or can't think of a contradiction if I don't have all the relevant details. So I don't know
If
that we
we've
have all the
already
relevant
agreed,
details.
for one, I mean, if you want to retract that agreement about it being logically possible, that's fine. But in the X case, whereas I gave like this variable X, for example, which is reflective of an object, and I say, can this same object exist in some other world, right? But it does not exist in that world or something like that. And you say, no, that's logically impossible. It's a contradiction because we know that X is identical to itself. So if that same X exists in some other world, then obviously that has to exist in that world. It cannot
But
exist in one
I don't
world
know.
and
So
exist in
hold
some
on
other
really
world
quickly.
because of the identity that grounds the relation there.
No, I
Pardon?
understand the argument you're making. Number one, it was more so that I steelman the argument that you made that it could be possible because I wanted to see the road that it led down because I was kind of curious about which argument you were making. So it's not so much of a repealment as it is just we're going to go back to
Well, it
that
doesn't
original
seem like a
question.
steelman, but if you want
Now
to
that we're not,
clarify it
now
was a
that we're
steelman, that's completely fine with me, right?
yeah,
So we can just
it's not
get
so
on
much
to the meat of potato.
it's not so much that it's a steel man as much as I just wanted to understand what your argument was in the first place. But like number two, what I'm still getting at
As I've
is
said, if you want to
I
phrase
don't
it like that, that's
okay,
completely
hold on.
fine. Okay, we could just like go under
Okay,
the supposition
I
that you
just
don't agree
wanted
with
to
this.
okay, I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. So like the number two though, I don't know if these things would be identical in these two worlds. So, based on our version of identity that we gave earlier in the conversation, where we agreed that identity was when two things or something, all the things that are true of one thing are true of the other thing. So that's how we
And you
like
agree with this view,
that
right?
was our working theory of identity, right?
Yeah, and you agree with this view, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with it. So you're proposing now an argument where we
Is it
have
true of
two
a mind that it
worlds.
can exist in a world where there's no physical objects?
Hold on, I don't know. So like I don't know if that's
Wait, hold
possible
on.
or
That
not.
means you don't know that your position is true then.
That's not what it means.
Yes, because if you don't know that minds could exist in a world without there being physical objects, but you obviously know that if there's a physical object, then it exists in a world with physical objects, then you know that physical objects are physical, but you do not know that minds are physical. So you're
No,
not
what
on
I'm
your old
saying is
position.
I know that the qualities that we often attribute to the mind, I know that there's evidence that they're actually physically linked or there's physical relationships with brain states and mental states. That's what I'm claiming to know. What
Wait,
I'm saying is
wait.
that wait, hold on. Because I feel like you said something I still haven't addressed yet. So when you ask me, is it metaphysically possible for us to have two worlds that are totally equal, that are totally the same, and yet one person has a certain mental experience and the other person has a different, if not no mental experience? I don't know if that's possible because I don't know what all the relevant details are that go into creating a mental experience or a mindful
Okay,
experience. I don't know.
so it just kind of like confuses me a little bit about how you're like kind of like jumping positions to position. So here's my
Mhm.
understanding of how this conversation's been going so far. So you've been making two different metaphysical profile. You've been making two different claims about the metaphysical profile of minds, I should say. The first claim was an identity claim, just to say that you're like an identity physicalist and you believe that for any psychological state X, it is identical to a physical state Y, for example. But then now you're making like a causal relation claim. You're giving like a causal story of how psychological states come to be, and that being that it is as a result of physical states. But then, for one, I can even just ask you for a semantical account of causality, and it's not going to be intelligible unless you're going under some sort of dependency relation account, which would contradict your position. And if I'm not going to do that, I can just simply say that your position, hold on there a second. Your position regarding the causal story of mental states and physical states respectively is compatible with a necessitarian dualist position, which a necessitarian dualist would affirm the position that, well, physical states so happen to cause mental states, but the mental states that are being caused by the physical states are of a completely distinct nature from the physical states, which are the causal resource or the causal source for those mental states, respectively. So your view is compatible with a non-physicalist view, which denies an identity physicalist position, like a necessitarian dualist position. And not to mention, even under your account of identity, it entails that the mind would not be physical, by the way, or rather, you're agnostic on your own position.
No, so to be clear, the reason why I brought up causality in the first place is because when we were defining physicalism, or we were asserting that my position was a physicalist one of the things that we described for physicalism to be is the relationship between things that possess mass and energy. So if we're going to commit to the idea that brain states are essentially relationships between parts of the brain that have mass and energy working together within some kind of chemical balance, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a neurologist, but you know what I'm getting at. That's going to be enveloped by physicalism. So that's why causal relationship was even brought up in the first place. If you think that causality is a bit of a misnomer in this conversation, maybe, but as long as you just like acknowledge that I'm talking about the relationships between parts of the brain when I say brain states, and as long as you acknowledge that I'm saying that mental states as you're describing
Wait,
them
why would I
are
acknowledge
tantamount
this?
to
You were
brain
talking
states,
about the
then I
relationships
don't think,
between
really
minds and
quickly, then
physical
I don't,
states.
hold on. As long as you acknowledge those things, then I think that my position is fine. I think it still holds true, independent of any kind of dualism or any
I
kind of.
really don't appreciate how you're treating my intentions here. Like you're acting as if I'm an uncharitable debater by
I didn't
interpreting your
speak on your.
position.
I didn't
No, I'm not
speak on your
saying you're saying this
intentions.
either. I'm not saying this. I'm just saying you're acting this way. You're giving me this
Okay.
impression as if I'm
No, I just
unjustified in
want
my
you to.
interpretation.
I just want you to acknowledge. Sorry, I just want you to acknowledge certain things about my argument because I'm trying to clarify. I think there was a miscommunication between
Okay.
us. I'm not trying to speak on your intentions. Like that's no, it's not a part of
Yeah,
it.
it seems
So
that
that's
way.
number
But
one.
like, I was just
I don't
making a
know.
claim. I was just,
Okay,
I think I
I'm
was
sorry.
making
It
a
feels
justified
that way.
interpretation of your position. And if you want to say that this is what I should acknowledge, that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry it feels that way. All I'm trying to say is that it seems like when I'm talking about relationships between brain, like parts of the brain, etc., that seems to correspond well with our understanding of physicalism as we assessed earlier in the conversation. The second
Okay.
thing that I was trying to say is I believe that there are mental states that are brought about by physical changes to the brain. What I was going to say is that there
But when you
are
say you
also mental.
believe, that
Hold
just
on.
sounds really unconfident. I expect a more confident claim on this
Now it feels like
because
you're
you're
not
defending the
actually
position.
making it. Wait, I would really rather you make a criticism of the argument than try to play armchair psychology. No offense
No,
to you, but
I've been
when
making
I say I
criticism
believe
the
something,
entire time. I've been
when
given
I say
actual
I
argument.
believe something, I'm saying it with my chest. I'm saying it confidently because I believe that I know it. So just we don't have to play semantics. We don't have to play armchair psychology.
I'm not playing semantics. I'm just trying to clarify your epistemic confidence to your belief. That's all.
No, I'm very confident. You're not trying to establish it. You just outright said that I'm not
I'm not
confident.
trying to
Like I don't.
establish anything. I'm trying to clarify what your confidence is towards belief. But let's just cut off the method,
I
okay?
don't know. It
What do
didn't
you want to
sound
say
very
right now?
clarifying. It sounded like you were asserting that I
Look, I
wasn't
don't even know
confident.
what
But
even meta debating.
we
Like, I
don't have
think
to
we should
play. We
just
don't
cut
have to
this
play.
out. Just go to the
We
meat
don't
and
have to play.
potatoes,
We
right? I
don't
think
have to
everyone
play.
wants like some substantive conversation.
Paulo,
Let's
we
just
don't
like
have to play
just
it.
continue your
I know. I'm
point.
trying to look. I'm trying to have a substantive conversation with you. That's what I'm saying. Don't play armchair
Yeah, that's what I'm
psychology.
saying, man. I think you're way too hung up on this. So like, yeah, just continue.
I know. I'm trying to move on. You don't need to clarify any further. Okay. None of
Yeah,
us
go
needs to
for
get
it.
the last word in. Okay. So that's all I was saying. Did you capture at least the first part of what I said about
I
how the
captured
causal
everything you said
relationships?
and the
Okay.
contradictions
Do you have
entailed from your
okay.
agreement
Hold on.
prior, which you've already
Before.
established.
Okay. Let's go over then. What do you think the contradiction is? Let's go over that.
So the contradictions given your initial position regarding you knowing that physicalism is true and you not knowing that minds can exist in a world where there's no physical objects is that if you know that physicalism is true, you know the mind is physical states. And obviously, an entailment of
Mhm.
such is that minds cannot exist in a world where there are no physical states because minds are a part of the set of physical states. But you agreed you do not know that minds can exist or
Sure.
cannot exist in a world where there are no physical states. So it just seems to be the case that given your
Uh-huh.
underlying agreements, your underlying background commitments that you have made regarding the identity claim that you have talked about previously, and your I guess, overarching position as it pertains to the philosophy of mind and whether you believe the mind is physical or not, it seems as if
Uh-huh.
there's not even seems as if it is obviously the case that there's some incompatibility there, right? As I've just established via my explanation.
Uh, Hard disagree. So I'm going to give you the scope of my argument, or rather, the scope of my disagreement with you. So I am very
Okay.
confident. I'm very confident that there are certain mental states or states of mind that do correspond with physical states or brain states. I'm very
Mhm.
confident on that. Now, beyond that, I acknowledge that there were certain mental states that are very hard to account for, if not outright impossible currently to account for with physical states, in the sense that we don't have enough information. But because of the
Ooh.
precedent that we've established, hold on. When I say impossible, by the way, just to be clear, I'm not talking about logical impossibility. I'm just saying that we currently don't have
Yeah,
the
I know, I
tools.
know, I know. You're talking about like a
I just want
practical
to
kind
make
of
sure. I just want
impossibility.
to make sure. I just want to make sure that
Absolutely.
we're clear. Okay. All I'm saying is that based on the precedent that, in my mind, has been set by the fact that
Uh-huh.
we have years of history of acknowledging mental states corresponding to physical states, I would make a robust prediction that if we did have all the physical facts, we would be able to predict and understand all the mental facts and how they correspond with those physical facts. I think that's a more robust prediction given the precedent behind it, from my perspective, than you have for your perspective. And that's why I'm saying that there is more evidence from my perspective than your perspective. When you ask me, is it metaphysically possible for the mind to exist without the body?
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible or not. I don't think you know if it's possible or not because, again, we don't have all the facts. And making claims about
I think it's
possibility is
just
only going to
uh-huh.
be meaningful if we have all of the relevant facts.
Yeah, I think it's just really audacious of you, really bold of you to make the claim that your theory is just a better theory of the mind than my theory, given your agreement that your theory is unable to exponentially account for some features of the mind, which points out there being an exponential gap, which could be filled by my theory, by the way. So, to be really clear in this, I have two questions, really, or rather two indirect objections. So, the first objection is simply, which is going to be in the form of a question, is going to be, well, what mental states do you believe that the language of physics cannot account for? Is it the qualia? Is it intentionality? Is it some other feature of consciousness? And the second objection I have is simply in the form of the Hempel's dilemma, which is just that your agreement with the idea that physics cannot explain for certain mental features would fall into the first horn of the dilemma. And if you're going to say that physicalism is the view that the mind is going to be something which is reducible to the physics, right? But then you agree that there's some features of the mind that we cannot explain using the language of the current physics. Then, just as you just did a while ago, you're going to want to appeal to some ideal future physics which does not exist as of now, which makes your theory and view unintelligible.
Okay, so I think that saying that it cannot account for certain mental states, I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I'm not saying it cannot do it. I'm saying that we currently cannot do it due to some sort of lack of resources or tools or knowledge on the subject. That's number one. Number two, when I'm thinking about things that we can't currently account for with our physical understanding of the brain, it's going to come down to things such as, well, in sociology and psychology, for example, there's a problem currently in that it's really hard to replicate tests as far as human behavior goes. It's really hard to make those types of tests replicable because of how diverse and sort of unpredictable by our current metrics human behavior actually is. Now, we know categorically how certain humans react to certain stimuli, but as far as the specifics, as far as the nitty gritty of how each individual person acts differently within those categories, that's something that we don't have the precision to understand yet. So we just need to be more precise in our understanding of physics. It's not that we don't categorically know that brain states and mental states are linked, if not outright the same. It's that we don't know exactly precisely how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You know, it dazzles my mind when you say that, well, we do not have the resources and knowledge as of now to explain these mental phenomena in the language of physics, given our lack of knowledge, obviously. But then the whole idea of what physics is based on our knowledge of the physical world and our theories. In fact, physics is quite literally just identical to the best physical theories we have, like, for example, modern physics, which is composed of Einstein's relativity theory and quantum mechanics, respectively. That's all we mean by physics. It's just the theory or best physical theories which attempts to explain the observable world, the empirical world as we know it. Okay, so if you agree that these theories cannot explain, right? And by cannot, I'm not saying it's logically impossible. I'm not phrasing your position to be logically impossible. I'm saying if you agree that given all the facts that we know of in these two physical theories, respectively, the Einstein's theory and the quantum mechanics, if you agree that these two theories cannot explain what certain features of the mind are, the mind and certain mental features are not reducible to any of these two theories, okay, then that
That's
would
not true.
mean, then that's the point. But you said that there are certain features that cannot be explained through the physics, which would mean that
Well,
they're
when you say
incompatible. Wait, hold on, hold on,
it's just
hold on, real
it's
quickly,
just
real
the
quickly.
fact
I
that
don't really, I really don't appreciate this interruption tactic.
okay, you
Completely
can go
not
ahead
right
and you
now.
can finish
Yeah,
up. You can
yeah, and
finish
I
up.
know
I
I
just
can
wanted to
go ahead,
say
and I would
something.
really like for you to allow me to go ahead and
No,
do
you can
it.
finish up.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
Finish
know.
up.
So I was just going to say that if you agree with this idea which is simply that there are certain psychological features which are unexplainable by our best physical theories. That was your that was the way that you verbatim explained your position and your points, right? Then it just seems really unintelligible to me. It seems like nonsense completely when you're going to make a claim that you know that physicalism is true, despite the fact that our current physics is not in a way that could be something which could exponentially account for certain psychological features. And then you have to appeal to some physics which do not exist. Like, that's just
It's
obviously
not that they
ridiculous
do
to me,
not
but
exist.
go give yours.
This is sorry, my fault. This is why I was kind of being interruptive earlier. It's because you load your language so much. You say these physics that don't exist, these things are innate, reducible to physics. You keep on loading your language as if to say objectively that these things cannot account for brain states or cannot account for all mental states. That's not the case. I'm not saying that they cannot account for those things. I'm saying that currently we don't seem to have the resources available to us to know every single nitty-gritty specific detail about the brain and the way in which it dictates our behaviors and our beliefs, etc., and that we would make the robust prediction that these things could be accounted for if we knew all the physical facts, because we have a strong precedent that when we do know the physical facts, we do have a lot of understanding about how the mind works, about how human behavior and human belief works. So that robust prediction is going to infinitely outweigh your lack of robust prediction, because you don't have a robust prediction that can explain these things,
Okay.
the worldview of the mind being some separate metaphysical entity. You don't have that kind of
Yeah,
robust
so not
prediction.
only are you just wrong
I'm
with
almost
this,
done.
right?
I'm almost done. I'm
Not
almost
only are
done.
you just, okay, go for it.
I
Okay,
promise I'm
finish,
almost
champ.
done.
Go for it.
I promise I'm almost done. All I'm saying is that the only defense you've really given so far is asking me, is it metaphysically possible that the mind is like a separate metaphysical entity, right? And again,
Okay.
and I don't think you have yet to address this. Neither you or I can really lay claim to whether or not that's possible, because we don't know all the relevant details. Maybe if we did know all the physical details of the universe, that wouldn't be metaphysically possible. We don't know all the relevant details, so we cannot make a claim on if it's possible or not.
If your interpretation of my position or my argument is just to say that it is metaphysically possible that the mind is a metaphysically distinct entity, then I really am concerned about your comprehension skills on that part. And I think that you tend to confuse loaded languages with language you perhaps don't understand, maybe given your lack of knowledge of the topic. But I did not load my language, sir. In fact, I gave an accurate explanation of what I meant and I actually clarified the terms to make it or to avoid certain equivocation. But I can re-clarify some stuff if you want me to. But you talk about predictions so often, like the fact that your theory makes certain robust predictions, which I don't. It's either the case that you're misusing the term predictions, or you just don't know what a prediction is. So I'll just go under the impression that you're misusing the term, maybe, and just clarify
Well,
what a
why don't
prediction
you just
actually
ask me
is.
what I think a prediction is instead of just assuming that I don't know things?
Well, I think that whatever you think of a prediction would not offer any sort of epistemic value to your position. So I just give my account of
I
prediction,
mean,
which is actually the
that just seems.
epistemically
First of
relevant.
all, that just seems opinionated of you. Second of all, the like not to say that all you're
Opinionated
doing is like
is a
not to
strong
say that
word,
all you're
man.
not to say that all you're doing is giving personal attacks, but I would say about 80% of your response so far has just been saying that I don't
Personal
know what I'm
attacks.
talking about,
When did I
that I have
insult
a
your
low level
intelligence,
of.
sir? I did not even call you
You
dumb. I did
said
not
if
call you
you
a
said okay.
retard.
First of all, you started this you started this point by saying if all you thought about my point was that I was asking you about metaphysical possibility, and if this thing was metaphysically possible, then I'm very
Yes.
concerned about like that. I don't know.
Your
That's coming from
comprehension
my
skills. Yeah,
awareness.
that's not an insult. That's
Yeah,
me
that's
being
coming. Wait, wait,
concerned.
wait. I'm not saying
As a
you're. I'm
good
not saying
friend.
you're.
That's me being
I'm not saying
concerned,
you're.
as a good friend
Wait,
should
stop.
be, right?
Please don't concern troll. Please do not concern troll. Like it's very
Wait,
clear
what are
that
you
you're trying to.
talking about?
I
I don't
mean,
know why like you're
you're
tripping
trying to
over.
instead
I
of
feel as if okay,
attacking
so
the
folks, I
argument.
feel as if you're just
Is
having
there,
an anxiety attack. I think I should just like calm down. It's
this
just
is
a
what I'm
debate.
talking
I'm
about.
not
This is
making
what
it personal.
I'm just trying to call out your
Look,
behavior.
I
I'm
just
just
think
trying to
you're
call out
getting
your
away
behavior.
from the beef for no reason. Okay,
I'm
I'm just
just
going to
trying to
clarify
call
right
out your
now.
behavior.
Look,
You're
Forks,
doing
I'm
it
just
right
going to
now.
clarify
Instead
right now. I'm not
of the
making any
argument, you're just
personal
coming
attacks.
for.
I
Okay.
apologize if you think that I was, and I don't know why you're having an anxiety attack for this. It's
No,
perfect.
I'm not
It's just
having.
a debate,
So,
okay?
sorry, you're
I'm
doing
not
it
making
right
it.
now.
I
Instead
was
of
just
coming for
deeply
the argument,
concerned
you're
as a
doing it right
friend,
now.
okay? I was deeply concerned about your comprehensive capabilities.
Okay,
That's all all.
To be clear,
Just
we're not.
relax.
We're not.
Okay,
To be clear, we're not.
it's funny how you talk about like my
Hold on.
uncharitable
No,
approach towards
you're doing it
conversation,
right
but
now.
you're continuously interrupting me. Like you just don't
No,
want me to
because you're
make a
doing
point.
it right now. You're still doing it.
But I
First of
thought
all,
conversations are about
we're
exchange of ideas. You're not even allowing me to exchange
not
my idea on the
exchanging
table.
ideas right now. You're not coming for the
I'm not
ideas. You're
exchanging
coming to
the
whether or
idea
not
on
I
the
know what I'm
topic
talking
because you
about.
just keep on interrupting me for some reason. I think that's really uncharitable of you.
Well, I interrupted you to
So,
ask you to go for the. Sorry, I interrupted you to ask you to attack the argument instead of just saying that I don't know what I'm talking
no,
about.
you
That I'm having an
interrupted me
anxiety
to
attack,
say that I should just
and then
ask you a
pretending that
question regarding what you meant by prediction. So you're not even tracking what was actually happening. What you said
I
about
mean,
you
I don't know.
giving
It
an
just seems
argument or
pretty
whatever,
clear.
that came after the interruption.
I mean, it just seems pretty clear that you're not going for the point that I made right now. You're just telling everybody that I'm having an anxiety attack, that I don't know what I'm
I'm
talking
just saying
about, that
this,
I'm
you have an anxiety
confused.
attack based off
And
certain
I even
observations, which is
offered, to
indicative
be
of
clear,
you like losing your
to clarify.
composure for no reason.
I
So I
even
think that was
offered,
pretty justified.
hold on,
Okay,
to be
but
clear, I
wait,
even
Forks,
offered to
Forks, relax.
clarify what
I
a
thought you
prediction
were all
was.
about meat and substance, man. Like, why are you just going off point like this? Could I
Well,
just
I
get
am
my
about
point on the
substance.
table?
I tried to
No,
clarify
you're not
with
on
you what
substance. You're
I tried to
criticizing my
clarify with you.
intentions
Hold
as a
on, you
debater.
said,
That is not a
hold
substance.
on.
That's not a substantive feature of the
This
conversation.
is so
Okay.
weird. Wait,
Yeah,
hold on.
you
I
attacking
tried to
my
clarify to
intentions
you.
and me supposedly personally attacking you is not us debating
Uh,
about physicalism. So that wouldn't be
no, I'm just
substantive.
asking
Okay.
you.
Oh, so
I'm
it
just
is
trying to
not.
point out your
So what are you
behavior. I'm just
talking
trying
about?
to get you to acknowledge your behavior. I even tried to
Wait,
clarify to
so
you
you
what I meant
you
by
agree
prediction
that you're trying to
when
give
you
a
prodded the
psychological
question whether or
analysis
not
on
I knew
my
what a
behavioral
prediction
input?
was.
Wait, so a psychological analysis on my behavioral input is something which is substantive to a debate about Philip Mine? Are
Yes,
you
it's
kidding me?
necessary for you to correct.
It
It's
is
necessary for you to
necessary?
correct
Oh wow,
yourself.
that's a
Yes, it's
strong claim, man.
necessary for you to
Okay, so
correct
could I
yourself
just
so
give
we
my
can actually
argument,
get on with
please?
the
I really
conversation.
don't appreciate the interruptions. I don't know what you're doing right now.
Look,
Just
I
calm
don't
down.
appreciate. Look, I don't think anybody's
Oh,
convinced by you
relax, bro.
pretending not to know what you're doing. We all know you know what you're doing. When I offered to
I
clarify what
know
I
what
meant
I'm
by
doing. I'm just
prediction,
trying to get
when
you
I
in check. I'm
offered
just
to
trying to get
clarify
you in
what I
check
meant by
because you're
prediction, you
way
said,
out of
"Oh, well,
proportion
it's
right
not
now.
going to add anything of value."
Just
Like
trying
you're
to
not very
get you in
interested
check because
in
you're just on an
adding value.
emotional rant right now. Could I just
Look,
give my
I'm
point?
just trying to grab a hold of the
The
conversation and get back to
conversation is going
something
so
of
civil, bro.
purpose.
Like we're just being like civil people.
I just
I don't
want
know
you
why
to.
you're
I
aping out.
just want you to
Look, I don't
attack
know
the
why you're
point.
aping out right now. I don't know what
I
Flip
just
switched
want you to. I
on
just
mid
want you to attack
conversation.
the point.
Look, I don't know what Flip switched
I
on
just
mid
want you to
conversation,
attack
but
the
we're
point.
being pretty civil in the beginning. Okay. I don't know why you're
I
aping
just
out like
want you to
this.
attack
Could I
the
just
point.
finish,
I just
please?
want you to not come for
Oh,
me
yeah, and I'm
personally. If
trying
you
to
think I'm
attack the
not
point, but you
understanding
just keep
something,
on
then ask
spurging.
me,
Like
and
I
then
don't
we
know
can
what.
go
I
on.
don't know what you look. Chim Chump. Look, just relax. No need to spurg out. Okay, could I just finish my
No,
point,
I'm just
please? I
asking.
cannot give the
Look, I'm
point.
very
Look, I
clear, and
cannot
that's
give the
what.
point if you keep on complaining
Look,
like a confrontational sissy about my behavior. I cannot do that.
I gave
At
you
least
about
in
a minute worth of
practice.
chance, and you used most of the
Yeah,
minute to come
we
from
just
point to
spent
me.
2 minutes
I feel
on
like
Forks trying to be my
I gave you
therapist.
a good
Okay, so could I just
opportunity,
get back
and
to
then
the
you kind of
substance, please?
ruined it.
Forks, could I just get back to the
I
substance,
don't know.
please?
I
Okay.
mean, I was
No,
trying to. I was
no,
trying to
you
get
don't
you
want to
back to
get
the
back to the
substance.
substance, and you're criticizing me for not getting to the
I just
substance.
need
That's
you to
crazy.
acknowledge. I just need you to acknowledge from this point forward that if you don't
You
think I
need
understand
me to
something,
acknowledge this.
I
That's a
just need
strong
you to
point.
acknowledge that if
Are you
at
being?
any
Are
point from
you
now
sound like a
on,
dictator right now? You're
yeah, okay,
dictating the way in
okay.
which I should approach
Look,
this
I'm just going to
conversation.
finish
You're
this sentence and
dictating
then
to
we're
me
going to
that
carry
I
on.
should
I
acknowledge
just
this.
need you to acknowledge that if at any point in this conversation from now
Yeah,
on you don't think I
you're being a
understand
dictator right
something,
now, and I
instead of
hope
posturing to
I
the
hope
entire
you have the
audience that I
self-awareness.
don't
Look,
understand
folks,
something,
I hope
maybe
you have
just
the
ask me if I
self-awareness
understand what it
to
is so we can
realize
clarify. If
how
you
much of
care
a
about
rhetorical
positivity, maybe
dictator you're
just
being
ask me to
right now. You're
clarify.
dictating how I should act. That's not really friendly, buddy.
I think
So
making a simple request of you is not
I
being
just
a
want you
dictator.
to
I
just
just think this
relax.
is very
Take a
insecure.
deep
I just
breather,
want you, if
okay?
you
I
think
just
I'm
want
not
to finish.
understanding something, just ask
Okay,
me.
so I guess this guy doesn't care about substance. He's trying to score rhetoric. So
Look,
could I
I
just
mean, trying to virtue
continue?
signal to the audience, trying to
Oh,
grandstand to the
really? So
audience
could I just
isn't going
finish?
to, it
So
doesn't
could I
matter
just
to me.
finish?
I just
Could I
need you
just
to
finish?
acknowledge if
Okay,
you
so he
think
just
that
keeps
I
on
don't
speaking over me.
understand something,
Look, I don't know,
instead of
like
this
what's going
bashful
on, man.
attempt
Like you're
to,
just tripping out for no
I'm
reason,
just
man. Like
making a
just
simple
relax.
request of
Okay,
you. I'm not
yeah,
attacking
just
you.
calm down
To
there,
be clear,
pal.
I'm not
Just
attacking
relax.
you.
Okay,
To be
cool.
clear, I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to
Uh huh.
de-escalate. I'm trying to make a simple
Uh huh.
request of you. All I'm asking
Okay.
you is that instead of
Okay.
grandstanding to the audience that I don't know what I'm talking
I'm not
about, if at
grandstanding, man.
any
That's
point,
really bold of you to
hold
assume
on,
that.
no, I'm just trying to make a simple. If at any point in this conversation you don't think I know what I'm talking about, instead of doing all of this entertainment, just ask me. Just
I'm not
ask
giving
me,
any
hey, Forrest, what do
entertainment,
you
man.
think
What are you
about this.
talking about?
And if you think, hold on,
If
and if
you're
you think that what
entertained
I'm
by my
adding,
Reddit
if you think
personally,
what I'm
then
adding is
that's
not
your
a
problem.
valuable
But I'm not doing any
contribution, then just
entertainment.
point it out. Just point it out.
Yeah. So, anyways,
No,
I'm just
I'm
gonna
just
finish my
asking you.
point.
It's very
So,
simple of you. That's
okay,
all I'm
okay.
asking.
So you interpret my little supposed point as, or my explanation as some sort of entertainment antics. Look, if you're entertained by what I'm doing personally, that's up to you. But I'm not trying to do this entertainment shit. Okay.
No, I'm
So I'm
asking
just
you
gonna
in earnest.
continue with my point.
But
I'm just
I'm
making
asking you
that
in
clear.
earnest.
Okay.
I'm
So could
asking
I
you in
just
earnest.
finish?
But I'm just genuinely trying to ask you in earnest, and you're just kind of like making a mockery, saying, "Oh, if you're being
I'm
entertained."
not
Look,
making
that's
a
not the point.
mockery. Oh,
That's
really? You
not
think
the
I'm making a
point. All I'm
mockery?
trying to ask you in earnest is, I gave you about a
Okay.
minute to respond. For most of that minute, you were
Okay.
talking about forks. You don't know what prediction is. You basically weren't tracking. You're
I
not
never
very
made the
aware of
claim
what
that you
you're
don't
talking
know the
about.
prediction is. I
And then
said
when I
maybe. You
asked you,
just used the word. I said a maybe.
hold on, and then when
I
I
had a
and then when I asked
possibility
you,
claim.
and then when I asked you, hey, I could clarify what I mean by prediction. We can see if that's the right
Yeah, I made a
terminology.
possibility claim, dog. What are you
You
talking
said,
about?
you said, you said, you said when I offered that,
What are you even
no,
saying
you're
about
not going
this?
to offer anything of value. You're not going to offer anything of epistemic value. It's like, look, you're very
I never
obviously
said
just.
you're not going to offer anything of epistemic
That is
value.
what you said.
In the
You
case,
just said
I said
exactly.
in the context of you referring to prediction as something completely different, and obviously you're not referring to any of the other justificatory values,
Uh huh.
then yes, maybe you'd not be offering any epistemic value. But that's not me saying that you're not offering any epistemic value to the
Look,
conversation holistically.
but it seems,
Okay?
it seems like a very easily, very obvious performative contradiction where you posture to the audience that you care so much about having a substantive
Yeah, I don't
conversation
know why you think
that
I'm posturing. Okay,
you would
but
spend so
look,
much
let's just
time
cut this out.
instead of
This
attacking my
just
argument,
sounds so immature on both of our
sorry,
ends. I think
sorry, I'm just trying
we
to,
just sound
sorry,
like
I
such
don't think it's
immature
immature to
kids
hold you
trying to
accountable.
like score
I don't think it's immature
rhetoric
to hold
points or
you accountable.
something. Like, let's just stop
I don't
this.
think it's immature to
I'm just
hold
going
you
to go back to
accountable.
maybe
So do you
you're trying
have,
to
okay, do you have
distract
a
me away
response
from
to
the
the point
point
that
so
I
that I
made?
don't
Do you
respond
have a
to your
response
point.
to
Is
the
that the
point that I
tactic you're
made
trying to
then?
pull off, Works? Are
Look,
you
if
trying to
you have
pull
a
off this
response to
tactic
the
where
point
to
that I made
distract
it,
me from the
look, we can
point?
go back to it. We can go back to it. All I was trying to get you to do was acknowledge your accountability, acknowledge that we can move forward without you concern trolling to
Yeah,
the
so could I
audience.
finish my point, please? Thank you.
Is it going to attack my point about the
Yeah,
relevancy
it's
of
going to be in
metaphysical
direct.
possibility?
It's going to be in a it's going to be a direct opposition. Sorry to your points. Yes,
Okay, go
direct
for it. Just make
attacks.
sure you keep the personal attacks out of it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really and truly. So when you're talking about predictions in your position, making robust predictions, that doesn't seem to be the case. Like when you're talking about predictions in like in sort of scientific discourses or theoretical comparisons type stuff, we're usually talking about there being some fact, some empirical factor, some metaphysical fact or consequence, which is expected under a given hypothesis. You haven't established any fact of the data that we're experiencing or analyzing. It's expected under the physicalist theory. In fact, I established the fact which is expected under the non-physicalist view, which is that the non-physicalist theory would expect that there can be mental states in a world where there are no physical states. That's the facts, the metaphysical fact, I should say, that the non-physicalist predicts, that the non-physicalist has predictive power as it pertains to. Your view has no expected hypothesis, whether metaphysically or empirically, which would establish any sort of predictive power, which would equalize the epistemic value of my theory, firstly. And secondly, just to be clear on one thing, I mean, you agree that the current physics is something which is not able to explain certain psychological phenomena given our lack of knowledge in the universe and physics, and maybe lack of technological resources. And you make the bold, audacious claim that in the future it will be the case that we will have the knowledge and resources the terms or language of physics. Now, I mean, whatever that physics is, it's obviously not going to be something identical to the current physics because of the fact that the current physics is under our knowledge parameters. And if it is something, or if the physics you're talking about in the future is something of a different scope of knowledge, then that means that physics will be different in nature. And I don't even know if we should call that physics. I don't even know how you justify in calling that physics. So really and truly, you're appealing to a future ideal non-existent physics in this context, which goes to have on them. But I still think you have to address the main point of the table, which is simply the point as it pertains to the metaphysical possibility of mental states existing in a world where there are no physical states. And yeah, I think it's your time to respond now. You can go for it.
All right, cool. Appreciate it. So again, it's not going to be like a new physics or something that's categorically different from the current physics that we have. Again, all I'm saying is that most of the examples of brain states and mind states that we don't currently comprehend are not about whether or not categorically we can say that there is some physical relationship between the brain and the mind, or whether or not they're the same thing, but rather with how much precision we can say those things. We don't know precisely why people act in certain very niche, very specific ways. That needs to be investigated further. We're not going to develop a brand new branch of physics for that. We're either going to expand upon our current physics knowledge, or we're just going to adapt it in a way that's not exclusive of how it is today, but rather to clarify and specify on these unknown variables that we're trying to investigate. That's number one. Number two, again, you're kind of kind of playing this idealism of the gaps here, where you're kind of appealing to the fact that, oh, our current understanding of the physical world, we don't totally know how every single thing or every single part of the mind is explained. And so you have no predictive power over that. And so there's some alternative theory that you're proposing that maybe the mind is some separate metaphysical object, and maybe that would have predictive power over those things we can't currently explain. I just want to make it very clear that if one system cannot totally and completely explain one given phenomena, that does not give evidence to the fact that another system could explain that phenomena, right? Just as we wouldn't say that, oh, there are certain parts of the universe that we don't know about yet or cannot explain yet, therefore God exists, because people who rep God claim that God could explain these things. We would never accept that as a valid argument. That's a form of appealing to ignorance. That is a logical fallacy. That's number two. Number three,
So,
again,
number three,
you
go
brought
for
up. Wait, hold on. Number three, because there's one more thing, and also the fake laugh is not. It's not appealing to anybody. But look, number three, your whole thing about like the mind being immaterial and the mind being separate from the body or whatever, or the mind even existing without the body, that does not have nearly the same robust predictive power that my position does, because there is no precedent behind it. We have precedent to say through concussions, through lobotomies, through certain drugs introduced to affect the brain, that these things, these physical properties, these physical relationships activate within the brain and account for many things that we attribute to the mind. There is a precedent there, and therefore the hypothesis that we would formulate that other mental states or other mental conditions could be explained by the brain states, that is a robust hypothesis that has some evidential backing. What you're doing is not predictive power. What you're doing is saying, well, I can imagine that the mind is something separate from the body, and I can imagine that that would attribute, explanatory power for these mental states. And I can't really think of a contradiction. So I think maybe that could predict, those things. That's not predictive power, to be clear. That's just imagining a resolution to a problem that's not evidenced, that's not proven. There's no precedent behind it. I think that our hypotheses to explain the universe are totally different in terms of how valid they are. So if you think that there was anything that I said in what, I just, gave as far as arguments, if you think anything I said was wrong, you can go ahead and point that out. And I need a sip of water. Holy shit, my throat is parched. Whew. Apollo, it's your turn. Hello? Am I lagging out?
Yo, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You scared me. Don't lag out
Okay,
like
so
that.
just a couple of things. For one, you just completely mischaracterized my objection. You said that my argument is identical or akin to the God of the Gaps argument. There's something that the physicalist cannot explain. In fact, the main argument I'm using against your position is called, which I know you're not aware of, the multiple realizability arguments, right? So that's number one. That's not even the arguments I'm given for, not even idealism. It wouldn't be idealism, but non-physicalism. The argument I'm given for non-physicalism. That's number one. That's just what I make clear in this too. Number two, you're saying that there's no precedence behind my view regarding what is metaphysically possible for there to be minds in the world where there's no physical phenomenon or state. There is precedence over it. It's called the conceptual analysis. So you investigate the concepts of both specific things or objects for me to talk about, and we try to derive whether there's a contradiction or whether there's not a contradiction. So, for example, how I know that it is metaphysically and logically possible to be a fat bachelor. Pardon? You said?
I didn't say shit, bro. Good.
I would say, give me a sec.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Are you back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, go ahead and close
Yeah,
the
I should
deal.
be good now. So I was just going to say how we know that it is metaphysically and logically possible for there to be a bachelor which is fat is by just looking at the concepts of what it means for someone and bachelor, and we look at the entailments of both concepts and see if they are incompatible with each other or if there's some direction or opposition between these two concepts. So we know that there's nothing within the concept of bachelor which rules out a bachelor fat, and we know that there's nothing within the concept of obesity which rules out someone being an obese bachelor. So we can then say it's logically possible for there to be a fat bachelor. So we apply the same logic here. So there's nothing within the concept of minds and what it means for something to be conscious or possess quality or intentionality, one could say, which rules out the possibility of there being minds in the world where there are no physical states and vice versa. So we can then derive from that it is obviously metaphysically and logically possible via the lack of contradiction and via a conceptual analysis, which is what substantiates there being a lack of contradiction. Now to respond to some other points you made regarding the expansion of the current physical theories we have, if we were to develop a explanation of how certain psychological phenomena works, like the things that you pointed out as it relates to behaviors and so forth, then that would be a new physical theory, right? All the current physics is just reflective of all the current physical theories we have. So the moment we're able to develop a theory which properly explains these psychological phenomena, that means that whatever the current physics we know of is would be different from the physics in the future, because now that physics would be something which is inclusive of a new physical theory. Now you're going to want to say that this new physical theory is perhaps like is derivative of the current physical theories, one could say, like the relativity theory or the quantum mechanics theory and so forth. But for one, that just seems to be quite significant insofar as just presupposing your position. You talk about the concussion example, that's not a prediction that the non-physicalist view is perfectly compatible with that view. In fact, the concussion stuff does not point to the causal relation. I mean, William James, the father of American psychology, actually gave a good response to this with the light prism example, whereas he says consciousness can be like the white light, and the brain is like the prism stone, and the features that our body exemplifies or demonstrates as well being conscious would be like the light rays, right? So, in other words, all the brain could be is a transmitter of consciousness insofar as it is what transmits consciousness to this physical dimension, but it is not the source of consciousness, nor is it identical to consciousness in itself. Your view regarding concussion and so forth is perfectly compatible with a non-physicalist view, and in fact, you pointing out to that data of concussions, for example, is not something which is offering a prediction against the non-physicalist, because it is something which is accommodated by the non-physicalist. So yeah, you can give a response now.
Yeah, like I want to give this response, and I'm hoping we can move on because I think we've kind of exhausted this point. As for whether or not what I'm talking about would still qualify as physicalism if we're adding on to our understanding of physics, our understanding of physicalism, as was dictated at the start of this conversation, was that we have things of mass, we have things of energy, and we have the relationship forces between those things. What I'm predicting is not that we're going to have a brand new category of physics, but rather we're going to expand upon our current category of physics by discovering and explaining a new forceful relationship between things of mass and energy, that being the brain, that being the brain states, that being how these things attune with each other and map onto what you describe as mental states. So no, this is not a brand new version or understanding of physics or physicalism. Yes, this is compatible with current physicalism. We're just adding on to our understanding of physics. No, this is not a good argument that what I'm saying is invalid. That's number one. Number two, as far as the thing, I'm trying to remember what other counterpoints that you gave, because you did speak for a while. Do you mind just reminding me really quickly of just a summary of the other counterpoints you made so I can respond to them?
I gave the light prism example. We're not tracking.
No, I was tracking. It's just that we've been going on for a while.
Okay, I'll just give the 2 points real quickly to summarize them. I'm not going to be like a douchebag. I'm not going to be a douchebag, so that's fine. So like I gave the prism example with like consciousness being the white light and the brain being the prism stone, and the behavioral mechanisms of the body being the light rays that are transmitted by the prism stone. So like it is actually compatible with like a non-physicalist view. It's not a prediction against the view. Yeah, that's the analogy or the analogy that the father of American psychology.
I think I remember what I wanted to say now. For you to give this example and for you to say that this is compatible with a non-physicalist worldview, or for you to overall argue that it is even possible for non-physicalism to be the case, again, you're going to have to prove to me that you have all the relevant facts of the universe that come to making this conclusion, that you have all the relevant facts about physicalism, and that there's no relevant fact about physicalism that you do not have that would actually disprove the possibility or compatibility of your worldview and the current existent world, which I don't think that you could do. You gave the example about how we determined that it's possible for bachelors to be fat. You said that we defined bachelors and fatness, and we realized that by comparing the definitions, there is no thing in either definition that kind of excludes the other, so there's no contradiction. The problem is that you have all of the relevant details of what it means to be fat and what it means to be a bachelor. So you can actually claim that there is no contradiction. You can actually claim that it's possible to be a fat bachelor. If we admittedly do not know all of the relevant details about the universe, about the physicalism within the universe, then we do not know if there is something out there beyond our understanding that we have yet to discover that would actually make some contradiction in the world being non-physical, right? We don't know if that contradiction exists or not. Neither you or I can prove that it's possible for physicalism to not be the case. So this argument about whether or not
it's really pitiful. It's really pitiful how you kind of.
I just don't think it's super substantiated. You're going to have to prove to me that you have all the relevant details about physicalism to make this determination that it's possible.
Yeah, so it's really pitiful how I kind of like fucked over your own position for me, although it's...
Just make the argument. Just make the argument. Just make the argument. Just make the argument. Just make the argument.
And just on us talking about this physical.
Just make the argument.
Right? Hold on. I'm not this speaking. Whether the mind is physical or not
just make
physical.
the argument. I don't care if you think it's pitiful. Just make the argument.
So yeah, I was going to give the argument. You don't need to interrupt me like 20 different
so skip over the bullshit.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to make my point. Just shut up real quickly. So you define the physical as that which is composed of mass or matter and energy and so forth. That is what it means from your perspective for the mind or for anything to be physical. That's what you mean by physical, okay? So this debate itself hinges on your meaning of what it means for something to be physical. So I asked you what is called the conditional question, by the way, the necessary and sufficient conditions for what it means for something to be physical. So under that account of what it means for something to be physical, the mind is not physical, because we can literally create a logically possible world, and it's entailed given the laws of logic and the nature of the mind and the physical states respectively. That there's a mind, or there are minds that exist in the world where there's no mass, there's no matter, and there's no energy. So given your definition of what it means for something to be physical, which is what we're both operating under, the mind would not be physical, because the multiple realizability argument. Sure. So that's the whole idea. So when you're talking about the fact, which is that we don't know, when you're talking about the fact that we don't know all the relevant facts about the physics, like for example, we don't know all the relevant facts about mass or microphysical objects or macrophysical objects or whatever, that is irrelevant, right? Because my view and the hypothetical, which is called the multiple realizability argument that I'm proposing, is encapsulating all the unknown and known facts about this category of things that you consider to be physical, and saying that in that specific world, whereas none of these unknown and known facts of this category of physical things exist, would there still be a mind, or could there still be a mind? And considering that the answer is, hold on there a second. I'm not done speaking. If you're going to do this, I'm going to keep on speaking over you. And considering that the answer is an unequivocal yes, given my arguments and given my conceptual analysis, it would be the case that the mind is not physical. And also, given your account of identity and the fact that you said that for two objects to be identical, all facts of one object has to be true of the other facts, and you agree, or rather, I've already established even the fact of minds that would not be a fact of physical objects, which is that a mind can exist in a world where there are no physical objects, but the physical objects cannot exist or has to exist in the world where there are physical objects. It would be the case that the mind is not physical.
We know you think that. We know that's your opinion. Okay, you're going to have to answer this question, though. How do you know that there's not a physical fact out there in the universe that presents a contradiction in a mind existing without a body?
How do I know there's a non-physical fact in the world which presents a contradiction? You'd have understood that this question has already been answered already. Like, hello, like, am I talking to a brick wall? Like, I'm just confused. Like, I'm actually just disappointed in how many times after
everybody's noticing you're going for the personal attack instead of answering the question, right? What I asked you was, how do you know that there's not a physical fact out there?
Right, but this is just so pitiful that you're not able to track the prior objections.
No, are you still not answering the question? You're still not answering the question. You're still not answering the question. question. How do you know that there's not a physical fact out there in the universe that presents a contradiction in a mind existing without a body? Please answer the question.
Yeah, so you understand that it seems as if this guy is just lost on what the debate
No,
proposition is.
please
We're
answer.
talking
No, do
about
you
what
guys
the mind
notice
is.
how he's dodging
Hold on.
the
We're
question?
talking about.
Please stop dodging
I'm
the
just gonna
question.
refresh your mind,
Please stop
okay?
dodging the
Because it's
question.
very clear you're not
Please
tracking
stop
the
dodging the
conversation.
question.
It's very clear you're
Please
lost in the
answer the
fucking arguments.
question.
It's very clear you don't
Please
even know what the
answer
fuck
the
you're talking
question.
about. Okay? So what the debate actually is about, by the way, buddy, is about what the mind actually is. Composed of
Please
physical
answer the
substance,
question.
or is it not
Please answer
composed
the
of physical
question.
substance? Okay? So we're making an identity claim right
Please
now. We're
answer the
talking about the
question.
identity of the mind. If I was to
Apollo, when are you
establish,
going to answer
right,
the
hold on,
question?
if I was to establish a counterfactual test, which entails that the mind would not be identical to physical substance, even under your view of what an identity claim is, or
Apollo, when are
identity
you going to answer
concept
the
is,
question?
it would entail the negation of your position. How do
Apollo,
you
I'm
not
super not
understand this,
interested.
my
When are you
dog?
going to answer the
Like,
question?
you're
When are you
embarrassing
going to
me.
answer the
I'm
I'm
like, what's
super
going
not
on?
interested. I'm super not interested. Everybody is convinced that you're dodging the question because that's evidently what you're
Hi,
doing right now. When
everybody
are you
already
going
heard
to
the
answer the
argument.
question?
Everybody's already heard the
Please
argument
tell
given
me
on
when
several
you're going to
occasions.
answer
What are
the
you talking
question.
about?
How do you know that there is
You
not a
said
physical fact
you
out there
said
in the
two
universe that
objects to be
presents a
identical.
contradiction in a
You
mind
said
existing without a
two
body?
objects to be
How do you know that?
identical. Right?
How do you know
All the
that?
facts
How do you know that?
of one
How do you know
object
that?
has to be of the other object. I've given a differentiating characteristic
Apollo,
of
please answer the
mind for
question.
physical objects, which would entail them being different. That differentiating
Please answer the
characteristic
question,
being
Apollo.
that it is possible. Hold on, dear second retard. That it is possible for this to be
We're all getting
in
agitated
a
at you
world
not
where there are no
answering the
physical
question.
facts, and it is impossible for there to be physical facts which don't exist in a world of just physical facts. So that's the
We're
differentiating
all getting
characteristic.
agitated. We're all getting agitated at you not answering the question.
Oh, really?
You're
Yes, I'm getting. I
you're
agree with
posing a
you. I'm getting agitated
hypothetical. Hold
completely
on, you're
because you're just
posing
being
a
completely
hypothetical.
retarded. I have
Hold
a
on, you're posing a
justified
hypothetical.
reason
Hold
for
on, you're
being
posing a
agitated, and it's
hypothetical.
because your
Hold on.
retardation is
You no, I'm not
insufferable.
saying you're
I have a
agitated. I'm saying
justified
we're
reason, of
agitated.
course.
You can
Agitated.
get
I
as
agree
mad as
with
you
you,
want,
man.
but look,
So
you
don't try to
pose
totally police me
hypothetical.
because
No,
I'm the
no,
only
no,
one who's
you're
good at
still
that.
not
You're not good
answering
at
the
this
question.
rhetorical shit,
You're
dog.
still avoiding
So just cut that
accountability. You're
out,
still
buddy.
not answering the question.
Yeah, I just don't even
You're
know
still
you're
not
trying to
answering
totally
the question.
police
You're still
me.
not
Agitated.
answering the question.
Of
You
course I'm
presented a
agitated.
hypothetical where there were two
Yeah,
universes where
your
all physical
retardation
facts
is
were the same.
insufferable, and I'm
How do
just
you know
really
that there's not
agitated
a
as a
physical
result
fact
of
out
you
there in the
failing to
universe
try the
that
points on
presents a
numerous
contradiction?
occasions, and
How
you
do you know?
begging me to repeat
No,
my
still
point
not answering the
because you're lost
question.
in
You
the
can go with
conversation.
any
Of course
personal
I'm
attacking
agitated.
if you want. You can
Have
evade
to
the
walk
question
you
as
through
much
the
as you want,
conversation,
but
have
nobody's
to refresh your
convinced that you have an
pigeon-sized
answer to this
brain of
question.
what the points actually are, and most importantly,
Nobody's
I have to
convinced
clarify
that
what
you
the
have an
fucking
answer
points
to
are
the
because your
question.
knowledge of this
Nobody's
topic is
convinced that you have
fucking
an answer to
minimal.
the
It's
question. You can
trash.
go on
It's
this
dog
ramble
shit.
as much as you
So as
want.
a
You can
result
go
of
for
this, I'm
personal attacks
agitated
all you
completely,
want. You
man.
can insult
So
me
how
all
about
you want,
this?
but you're
How about
still
this?
not answering the question.
I want you to be a honest debater, a charitable debater,
Just
a honest
please answer
debater,
the question. I want you to be an
honest
honest
enough to
debater too. Please
concede
answer the
that your
question.
account of
You
identity
presented a
entails your position
hypothetical in
being
which there were
false,
two
and
universes
walk
with
out
all of
the
the
debate
same
with an
physical
L and
facts,
say,
and
you
there
know
were
what,
two different
Apollo?
outcomes.
You beat
Can
me
you
up
prove
badly.
that there
I'm
is
gonna
not
go
a
do my
physical fact
research like a
out there
good
that
boy and
doesn't present
come
a
back next time in a
contradiction
month
in the
time
body
and
and the
re-debate you the
mind
same
existing
topic. I want you
separately?
to be honest
Can you
enough
please prove
to
that?
do that, okay? Okay, buddy? I'm giving you a pro tip right now because you look like fucking
I'm
trash
going to
right
give you a pro
now. Okay,
tip,
I'm giving you a
Apollo.
debater
Answer the
pro tip.
question. I'm going to give you a pro tip. Answer the
Usually when
question.
debaters get slammed, as how you're getting slammed right
I'm
now,
just going to,
what
look,
they
I
do
just
is
don't
they
know why you
concede
didn't
the
answer the
fucking
question.
debate. They go to the
I just
drawing
don't understand why
board,
you're not
they
answering
do
the
their fucking
question.
research, and then they come back
Look,
for a
I'm just
rematch.
super not interested.
How
We're not
about
going
you
to
do
carry on
that,
this
buddy?
conversation
How
if you're
about you
not
do
going to
that,
answer the
dog?
question.
How
If
about
you're
you do
not going
that,
to
dog?
engage with the point,
Okay,
then you're
so
just
you
going to
cannot
concede
dodge
while
the
avoiding
question.
the rejoinder. Look, if
You
you're not going to answer the
genuinely,
question, you're just conceding
seriously
right now. You're just not giving an adequate
believe,
defense. Like, that's just a
if you
concession.
genuinely,
I asked
seriously,
you a very
unironically
specific
believe
question that you've
that
refused
I've
to
been
answer for the last 5
evasive
minutes.
towards your
Everybody
question,
has sat here
then
and
you have
waited
the
for you to answer
comprehensive
the question.
skill of a
How do
fucking
you
brick
know that
wall.
there is
Because
not a
not
physical
only
fact
answer
out
the
there that
question,
presents a
right, but
contradiction
pointed
in your
out the
worldview? How do you
irrelevancy of
know
the
that?
question, given what the debate proposition is. So you're just not even tracking the
So you don't know
conversation.
that.
And
So you
that's the
don't know
reason
that.
as to why you've been
Okay.
repeatedly
Thank
asking
you,
me to repeat
everybody, for
the
coming
point
out to
because
this
you haven't
conversation.
followed
Thanks
the
for
points.
everybody showing
Can't
up and
even
showing your
memorize the
support.
points properly.
I'm sorry that Apollo could not be bothered to answer a very
Oh
simple
really?
question.
Oh
I
really?
think
Look at this guy, bro. Like
I think
he's
we're about
so
done
oh my
here
god, he's so
because I'm
delusional.
not really
He's so
interested in this guy
delusional.
sitting here
Like, how
It's
can
all to
someone be
just arguing the
this much of
point.
a borderline delusional
I think
fuck
that's
to the
about it.
point where
Yeah,
she thinks he's doing another conversation? Dude, you
I
lost.
think that's about
You
it.
lost. It's done. Okay? Do you want to
I
add to
think that's
conclusions, bro?
not particularly.
Yeah, of course.
I just wanted you to answer the question.
Of
I mean,
course,
if you're
man.
not even
But,
gonna
but I
answer
mean,
the
I don't even
question, I
need
don't really care
conclusions. The
about
debate is already
conclusions.
you lost. It's the fucking P, bro. Like, it's
Okay.
crazy.
I mean, if you feel that way, I mean, that's your
Well,
opinion, I
I
guess.
don't
I
feel
just
that way.
wanted
I
an
know
answer
that
to
way.
the
I
question.
know for a fact. Okay.
I mean,
On
I'm glad you feel
every lens of
confident,
the
I guess.
conversation, rhetorically, argumentatively, and knowledge-wise, it just got destroyed, man. It's just bad. So we can just end this recording. just save the recording,
Okay.
and then we just post this on YouTube. It's okay.
I'm not gonna
Just
argue
go
with
back to
you
the
whether
drawing board,
it's
retard. Do
wrong.
your
I mean,
research, then
look,
come
I
back.
just
It's just
think
okay. It's just
I
really
just want
funny.
to
It's just really funny that you came in
no,
the
I was
server
trying.
like
I was
Thanos in
literally
this
about to
bitch.
give
You
you
came in the
props.
server
I
like
was
Thanos. You're
literally
like,
about to give
oh,
you
I don't
props.
think
I was
anyone
gonna,
can
I was gonna
stop me
give
in
you
this bitch.
props
I'm
for
gonna
your
run my
confidence
gauntlet real
level.
quickly.
I
I
was
don't
gonna give
think
you props
Porco
for
or
your kind
Infinity
of
can stop
rhetoric.
me. And
I
it's
was kind
funny
of about
because
to
you're
send
not
a
even
compliment.
Porco level. You're not even
You're
Infinity level.
actually
So how do
mad
you
that
think
I
you
was
could
gonna
approach me
compliment
above?
you.
Well,
I was
I
just
approached
about
you
to
obviously.
compliment
I was
you.
only
I was just
asked you
about to
because
compliment you, dog.
I just felt the desire to bully some retard online today. But really and truly, it just that's just my
Look,
mind.
I
How
was
you think
literally about to
of yourself this
compliment you.
highly
I don't
when
know why
you're
you're so
nowhere close
angry.
to
Look,
like
I don't know why
you're
you're
not
so
even in the
personally
top
upset
three
about this.
debaters in the server,
If the debate is
excluding me.
over, why are
Like,
you
let's
still
just exclude
upset?
me from the equation.
If the
You're not
debate
even
is
the
over,
top
why
three in
are
the
you still
server.
upset?
So, like,
If
who are
the
you even
debate is
talking to?
over,
Sign
why are
about
you
your
still
skill
upset?
quality, man.
If the debate is
Look,
over,
look,
why are
I'm
you
just
still
gonna
upset?
I'm just gonna cut the shit talk. I'm just gonna
So
cut the
you're
shit
just
talk.
upset.
So it's not even really shit talk. It's more like pep talk.
If the
Okay, because
debate is over, why
I'm
are
just
you still
calling you like
upset?
son. So I'm just gonna like cut the pep talk. You research, come back. Okay,
So I
that's the only
don't
advice I got for
understand.
you.
Look, can you just calm down
That's
for a
the only
moment, bro?
advice I
There's
got.
no reason to get this upset once the debate is over. Just
Oh,
take a chill
really?
pill.
There's